Hello, my name is Heidi Parkes and I am a quilter in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the United States. This is my first time having a quilt accepted into Quilt National, and I'm very excited to be exhibiting at the Dairy Barn. The quilt that's on display is called Mimi Mimi Mimi. My grandmother's name is Mimi, or rather that's the nickname that I always used for her. Her name is Marion. She is 92 years old right now and has suffered some memory loss. She has dementia, and I've been reminiscing a lot about my most joyful memories with my grandmother from when I was little, in particular during the decade in the 90s where she lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I am 40 years old, and so in my youth in elementary school and junior high, I would visit her, and it was such a joy to soak up the Southwest and to be there with her. I was recently able to teach quilting in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was teaching a class on travel diary quilts, and diary quilting is something that I do very often that I love. The class centered around logging and tracking our time in Santa Fe in the Southwest and being curious travelers rather than just tourists. I was able to juxtapose that adult experience in Santa Fe with my childhood experience in the Southwest. One of the very special memories that came through in the quilt was around a store called Jackalope. It's a place where you can buy, I think, reused items, and my grandmother loved that store, and it's still around now. That is part of why there is a jackalope in the quilt. It's a mythical creature like a unicorn, but from the Southwest, featuring a rabbit. There are a lot of rabbits in my quilts, and the ears, the antlers of an antelope, hence the merged name. Things like that of being observant, or moments where a memory that I had forgotten then kicks back in and I do remember it again, are very special to incorporate in my work and into the times when I'm making a quilt. Memories are an important part of travel diary quilts, but also diary quilts in general. For example, these two quilts behind me are both diary quilts. This one tracks the pandemic in 2020. I added to it every day for 100 days, starting in April. The quilt above is one that I just finished in the summer of 2023, and I began it in November of 2022. I turned 40 in December, and I was very curious to track and find out what was it like to turn 40 and to notice that moment in my life. So that's a little bit of how I find my ideas and my inspirations, some of the overarching themes in my work. I went to college back in 2001 till 2005 at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I began with a passion for ceramics, and that passion for ceramics originated again with my grandma Mimi in the Southwest. We would work with clay in her garage and paint tiles and sculpt things and learn about the pottery that was in Santa Fe. And that led me to taking a lot of ceramics classes in high school and wanting to be a high school art teacher. And then, of course, I realized I needed to know how to draw and paint and work with other mediums in order to have that job as well. So when I began at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I was eager to try a lot of different things, and I eventually found myself naturally gravitating from ceramics and painting and drawing to fiber arts and textiles. I studied with Diana Guerrero Macia and Ann Wilson, and learned a lot about art and the everyday, working with ordinary materials, being curious about daily life rather than unique, special, rare experiences. There are some nice moments of daily life in Mimi Mimi Mimi. There's a tank top that I wore for about a decade that's orange. Here you can see the shoulder strap of the tank top and lots of little pieces of it. And Mimi 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 was the first quilt where I cut into that retired and mended tank top. So the body part of the tank top looks to me a lot like one of the mesas, the big mountains that are in Santa Fe, and it's this large orange part of the quilt. Some other materials that are important and that hint at everyday life in the quilt are some polka dot fabric that actually was something that Georgia O'Keeffe used to wear a fair amount, which surprised me. But I went to the O'Keeffe space at Ghost Ranch and saw a lot of her clothing, and I had been listening to some audio books about her. And I was really delighted that I happened to have some polka dot fabric, and that referenced her as an inspiration, as someone that my grandmother talked to me about and shared that story. So that type of fabric, those polka dots, are another special item in the quilt. There are some milagros that I purchased for luck and for healing of a variety of body parts. And the quilt also then reflects on how I felt when I returned home, reflecting on my time in the Southwest. I had a little piece of juniper that I embroidered carefully on there. And I also depicted my hand with some weaving, and I went in and did some thread darning with those to depict my hand and the hand of the maker, as well as my appreciation for mending and for the weaving that I saw when I was in the Southwest, and perhaps the petroglyphs as well that depicted human hands. I am so humbled and happy to be in this exhibition, and I hope that there are many moments of discovery for you as you look through the quilt, me, and hopefully some extra wonderful insights knowing that it connects both to a trip that I went on and to my grandmother.